this is your chance to speak directly with the governor. Call us at 844-745-8255. That's 844-745-8255. We'll also be reading your questions via social media using the hashtag AskGovMurphy. And the number again, 844-745-8255. We're joined live now by Governor Phil Murphy. Good evening.
Good evening, Nancy. Thank you for having me, as always.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
Beautiful fall day.
Yeah, God, I love the weather. Love the weather. So let's start, sadly, with the death of Sissy Houston, Grammy Award-winning gospel singer and the mother of Whitney Houston. I hear you're going to speak at the funeral a week from tomorrow. She was the leader of a gospel choir in Newark for more than 50 years and really a towering figure in Newark cultural life, right?
No question about it. A huge loss. I last spoke to her on her birthday, in September of 2023. Mrs. Houston campaigned for me in my first run, and I was incredibly honored by that. And she had an extraordinary career.
Yeah.
She was a backup singer for everybody from Aretha Franklin to Elvis Presley to her daughter Whitney. She sang backup on some of Whitney's biggest hits, which is pretty cool. And then she got out front later in life and won a bunch of Grammys as a gospel singer. So she sort of lived both. What's that? 20 Feet from Stardom, that great, whatever it's called, that great documentary about the backup singers and backup musicians. And at the same time, she graduated herself to the front of the stage. And of course, her daughter was one of the great transcendent talents of all time, never mind just in New Jersey. She was a giant cousin to Dionne Warwick. I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah.
Related to Leontine Price, the opera singer. You talk about a family.
Yeah, really.
Just an extraordinary woman, extraordinary talent, never left Jersey. And it's a huge loss. And as you mentioned, I'm incredibly honored to have been invited to say a few words at her memorial service a week from tomorrow.
Sounds like it's going to be an incredible event as well as a service. I mean, there's going to be probably some amazing singers.
I mean, you would
there.
think. I just hope they're not going to ask me to sing. That's the only.
Oh, come on! You're supposed to be a good singer. We've heard you hum a few bars.
I love that. But listen, let's all keep her and her family in our prayers, because she's had her fill. She had her fill of tragedy over the years. Obviously, losing Whitney, among others. But what an incredible woman. And an incredible talent in Jersey through and through.
Yeah. Well, speaking of prayers, Hurricane Milton is bearing down on Florida right as we speak. And of course, Florida is still dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. I know you sent aid to Florida for Helene, and that you've got plans for Milton. So tell us both about what you did for Helene and what's coming up for Florida.
So it's a good question on both fronts. And I'm proud of the fact that we've never said no in my almost 7 years. And we never care if it's a red state, a blue state, what kind of storm, short notice, long notice, through FEMA, straight up, whatever it might be. So we had, I think, Nance, 106 members, state troopers, search and rescue, split between North Carolina and Georgia. Some of them are now coming back. I'm virtually certain, I'm not making news here because I don't want to speak for FEMA. I'm virtually certain that they're going to be back and filled with some fresh bodies from Jersey. And I suspect they will not just be Georgia and North Carolina, that they will stage and be there for Florida if need be. As a separate matter, we have 80 guardsmen and women in Florida as we speak, 30 military vehicles. My guess is that number is going up and not down. We're going to know at 7:04. I think they've been saying between 9 p.m. and 2 a.m. we're going to know if this is a direct hit on Tampa, which would be the first in over a century, with swells and winds. And yet they measure these things, the pressure, by these millibars. And this hurricane hit the all-time record low, which is bad news. It's since bounced off of that. But my guess is that we're going to be asked for more help, and we will be there for Florida as we were for Georgia and North Carolina. And by the way, anybody out there who doesn't think climate change is real, look at this. Just the past 2 or 3 weeks, You look at a place bucolic like Asheville, North Carolina. Tammy and I were at a Democratic governors conference about a year ago where we had a glass of wine and sort of strategized. The entire neighborhood is wiped out, and praying that this thing somehow misses. I don't think it'll miss Florida, but somehow gets diminished because it looks like right now they're going to get crushed.
Well, it's a good pivot point. I wanted to talk about the election with you, but let's linger for a moment on the idea of climate change and these storms where, you know, particularly it almost seems like red states are getting walloped more because it's the South.
It's a South Atlantic season.
Texas, Florida, and of course the Carolinas.
I'm sure that's unleashed a lot of conspiracy theories.
Yeah, I believe it has.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts on, is the needle going to move in terms of the public really putting pressure on Congress to do more about climate change?
I have to say, I used to be more optimistic. I remember when I was our ambassador in Germany and folks were talking about how come we couldn't get climate treaties ratified in the U.S. Senate. I said, listen, I don't see it with this generation, but I have enormous optimism that the next generation will see it differently. And then you see statements by people like Marco Rubio, who should know better, just says these knucklehead things about climate, and Rick Scott. These are the two senators in Florida. You'd think of all the people who are elected. In fairness, I have to say Governor DeSantis has been, by my taste, doing a decent job. He's working with President Biden. He knows he needs help. He's working with FEMA, to his credit. But you've got people saying things. So Rick Scott's more my generation than Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio is the next generation, and he's part of a group who should know better. I'm still a cautious optimist because the facts don't lie. And even in New Jersey, I'm knocking on wood here, this has been a South Atlantic Gulf hurricane season so far. So we're still in, October 9th. We're not out of the woods yet. But there'll be some year, not too in the distant future, where we're going to be in the batter's box. And for all that we're doing in this state, and we're doing as much as anybody, you can't do it alone, and it's still not enough. And you need a federal fix to your question. You need Congress to pass big things. And I guess still hoping that that'll happen.
Okay, well, so we are this is the last time we will speak before the November election.
Oh my God.
You held a fundraiser for Kamala Harris. I think that was last week or
Saturday night, right here with
the
second gentleman, who I hope will be the first gentleman soon.
So what else do you expect to be doing in this run up between now and Election Day, both either nationally or here in New Jersey? So
we did President Biden's last fundraiser probably ever. Most of that money is DNC money, which means that was going to go with the candidate, whoever it is. So that traveled with Vice President Harris. We just raised a bunch of money with the second gentleman very successfully. I might add, Tammy deserves overwhelmingly the credit. So raising money. We're an export state right now. Kamala's not going to lose in New Jersey. Andy Kim's not going to lose. We've got a competitive House race, which is the 7th. We should talk about that. Tom Kane defending against Sue Altman. Tammy was campaigning with Sue today. I'm going to get out there in the next number of days with her. So we've got some down ballot races that are important, but we're largely an export state. So we're exporting money. I saw a bunch of buses off on Saturday morning out of Montclair going into Bucks County, I believe, in Pennsylvania. Almost everything we're doing that's specific to another state is Pennsylvania, not entirely, but largely. I spent the past 3 days in Philadelphia, did a big rally on Sunday with fellow governors and the mayor of Philadelphia. Tahisha Way, our great lieutenant governor, was in black churches in Philly. She was in Atlanta. She's heading on the road again. I'm going to be in New Hampshire in a week and a half, I guess 2 weeks, pardon me. I hosted a debate watch party in Bucks County. So we're doing everything we can. I think that you didn't ask. I think this is on the knife's edge. I think this is as tide gets. I still think it's ours to lose, but we could. Or put differently, I slightly would rather be playing our hand than their hand. but it's really close, and that's incredibly discouraging given the contrast between the two visions for our country. But and we'll do whatever we're asked to do.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to come back to NJ7 and some of the other things you brought up on elections, but let's squeeze in a question from social media. We have Kenneth Burns from WHYY.
The Ken Burns.
Hey, Ken Burns.
One of many, are you saying?
There's at least one other one.
Okay.
I preface this by saying 7 people asked this question today. Jay in Cherry Hill, Kathleen in Wall, Pat in Belmar, Deidre in Manasquan, Carol in Spring Lake, Katie in Asbury Park, Rob in Manalapan.
I'm braced.
They would like to know why you, Governor, have not endorsed Andy Kim for Senate. And I should point that last month we explored this and you said that you were going to vote for him.
I absolutely said that, and I will. Listen, I've said this so many times, this is almost laughable. It's no secret he wasn't my first choice, okay? So let's get that off my chest, given who was running against him. But the fact of the matter is the vote for the Senate Majority Leader is too important to screw around, and that's a fact. But you know who I endorse? I endorse people who ask me for their endorsement. And Andy, and I don't begrudge this, he's been very specific on the record that he doesn't want it. And I got no issue with that. I'm going to vote for him. There's too much at stake otherwise. But for the folks who asked that question, they should be asking Andy why he didn't want my endorsement. But listen, he's going to win. I thought he played that debate in a very horrifying moment. And I know both these guys. They're both good guys. I've known Curtis a lot longer than I've known Andy. And people hear I say something nice about a Republican, and therefore I've lost my mind. But Curtis is a good guy. I don't agree with him on everything, but I was worried about him the other night. But I connected with him afterwards. It sounds like he's fine. Andy did the right thing.
A lot of people aren't going to know what you're talking about. So this was a debate between Curtis Bashaw and Andy Kim in the U.S. Senate race. Yep. And Bashaw kind of froze up and almost kind of seemed to be tremoring and like he was maybe going to faint. And Andy Kim went over to his podium and asked him if he was okay. And they took a little commercial break. And when they came back, he was fine.
He was fine. And I connected with him afterwards. He was fine. Did you guys do that one? I can't remember.
That wasn't us.
Yeah.
Wasn't us either, by the way.
It wasn't you either. Okay. But that's the answer to that. Yeah. But the vote's too important.
I mean, I think it's a perception issue. We talked about it last time. I had no intention of bringing it up again, but clearly, like people
Ken had a different idea.
Well, people are writing in. They care. So it seems like a fair enough thing to go back over.
I would hope that they know that I care too.
7 people, Governor. I just bring them up to you.
But that's right, so I'm giving you the answer that's from the heart. Yes. Right? If Andy called me tomorrow, that you should ask the follow-up question. If he called me right now and asked me for my endorsement, I'd give it to him.
It sounds like all those folks want you to do it.
Yeah, right.
And you should do it for them.
How about they should call Andy?
Okay.
And ask him to call me?
All right, well, let's talk about the Sue Altman, the Democratic challenger in the 7th Congressional District against Tom Kane Jr., the Republican incumbent who is a freshman. He beat Tom Malinowski 2 years ago. So do you see this as a critical race nationally for Democrats? I mean, clearly in New Jersey, people care about this race, but what about nationally?
It is. It's hard to say otherwise because I think the House is going to come down to a handful of races. And we lost one seat in 2022, and it was this one. And it was a knife's edge election. Malinowski gave it everything he had, and he lost by 3. And we didn't have the reality that New York State had. New York, I think, Nance, correct me if I'm wrong, or Ken, they lost 4 or 5.
Yeah.
So we had a speck of that, but we didn't have those lost suburban seats that had historically been leaning our way. But the answer is yes. I think this is going to come down to very few seats. And this is competitive. Right now, Charlie Cook, who I have a lot of time for, says this leans Republican. That's probably true given that Tom is the incumbent. But Sue's got a poll that has her within striking distance. And Tom didn't do himself any favors. I'm not sure you saw this clip of last week.
Yeah.
You got to
describe it briefly.
Yeah, so he's getting out. I didn't see I think he got out of his car and walked all the way to his office.
He was in the elevator
To his office
at the Capitol. Yeah,
with a good-hearted reporter who said, "Listen, you answer any question you want. Everything from Ukraine to what are you having for lunch? How many sugars in your coffee? The Yankees."
Yeah.
And Tom refused to speak to him, but that's a example of a bigger issue that Tom has had. And if I'm not giving Tom advice, but if you were to ask me for advice, you got to do what we're doing right now. The three of us are up on the wire with no net. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the next question is that you're going to ask me.
You're not going to like it.
Yeah, I'm sure I won't. I never do. Or the next call in or the next social media. I don't know it. But that's the nature of this business. It's elected office. You got to be out there. You've got to take your lumps. And Tom right now is, and again, this is a good guy who I have a lot of time for. His dad is one of my mentors. So this is nothing personal, if you will. But Tom is a vote for Mike Johnson as speaker. He's a vote for, you list all the things that would come out of that. And Sue, who I've known now for going on 10 years, is a vote for Hakeem Jeffries and everything that would come from that. So you asked the right question. Is this important in Jersey? Yes, it sure is. Taking one back would be really important. I'm the titular head of the Democratic Party. Just like holding the Senate is really important. I want to make sure Ken heard that. But in the bigger picture, this is going to be one of a handful of races that will decide who the speaker is.
You're listening to Ask Governor Murphy. I'm Nancy Solomon, and we would like you to call and ask your questions of the governor. 844-745-8255 is the number, or you can tweet at us using the hashtag AskGovMurphy, and we'll get you on the air to ask your question. So you mentioned that you are planning to campaign for Sue in NJ7. What do you know? Is it going to be like a rally? Or are you going to go knock on doors?
She and I, Tammy and she did a couple of events today. Sue and I spoke yesterday morning, I think. And we're still wargaming. She asked for some help with the DCCC, which we're trying to help her out, which is the Washington-based Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. And I want to do, at a minimum, something big on the trail with her. And I think she welcomes that. And secondly, to headline a fundraiser for her at a minimum. But I said to her, you ask and we're going to be there. And I'm a huge fan. She's been a voice in the wilderness, speaks truth to power, and to her credit, including to me, and I have a lot of respect for that. But this is a tough race. I mean, I would be lying if I didn't say right now this would lean slightly to Tom Kane's way.
There are more registered Republicans in the district than there are Democrats after redistricting.
Absolutely. But there also, this is a hotbed for abortion rights, reproductive freedom, democracy, and just being. And Sue's a proud progressive, and she is what she is, and she is what she seems to be, which I love. So we'll see.
Politico recently reported that Tom Kane and Josh Gottheimer, the Democratic congressman who appears to be running for governor, that neither of them have put their money in a blind trust or their investments. That's something you've done.
I have.
And
as painful as it is.
I'm wondering, we have just a minute or two, but less than that. But do you feel that, does it take a long time to do that? Because people have been waiting for Tom Kane to do this. He said he would, and it's been a year and a half and he hasn't. Does it take a long time when you have a lot of money?
Whether you have a lot of money or not, it's time consuming. But in fairness, I work under state laws and they work under congressional and federal laws. So I'm not familiar with, my gut tells me it's more complicated for them than it is for me, but we've done it.
Okay, this is Ask Governor Murphy. We will be right back.
And you're listening on WNYC. Beautiful night outside. We're going to have temperatures in the upper 40s. Right now, the Mets are down a point in the middle of the sixth inning against Philly. The Yankees, no score on the board against Kansas City. WNYC 720.
I'm Brian Lehrer. This week on our live national election series, America, Are We Ready? We'll talk about how healthcare policy may be affected not only by the presidential election, but by key down-ticket races as well. I'll be joined by Marketplace's Kimberly Adams and Julie Rovner of KFF Health News. And we'll take your calls. Join us for America, Are We Ready? Live tonight at 8 on 93.9 FM, AM 820, or live stream it at WNYC.org.
The Investment Company Institute. For the last 100 years, mutual funds have helped Americans achieve their long-term financial goals. More on the importance of the mutual fund at ici.org/mf.
To Ask Governor Murphy, a co-production of WBGO, WNYC, and WHYY. Got a question for New Jersey's governor? Call us now at 844-745-8255. That's 844-745-TALK. Pose your question on Twitter or Facebook with the hashtag AskGovMurphy.
I'm Nancy Solomon, and we're back live with the governor taking your calls. And let's go to our first caller of the night. We have Glenn from Monmouth on the line.
Hey, Glenn.
Great. Thank you so much. Hello, Governor. And let me start by saying it's really nice to hear that we're helping out our friends down south. So thank you very much for doing that.
Amen.
I have a question about our wind industry ambitions here in New Jersey. I know you plan on putting 800 to 900 turbines, out in the ocean. And specifically, the concern I have, and I'd like to describe that and then get your feedback, is how we're going to connect that to the power grid, right? So I know the BPU's current plan is to take most of that energy and run it through a single route in a single power line in a shallow trench through residential streets in Seagirt, Manasquan, Wall, and Howell. Now that's going to be 6,000 megawatts, which for the viewers out there is equivalent to the power that would be generated by 10 nuclear reactors. So imagine someone comes in and installs 10 nuclear reactors right down the street from you and runs all that power in a shallow trench 10 yards from your front door. A lot of people are concerned about that and the potential health risk, as well as this particular route is going to run through an EPA designated toxic Superfund site, which I think has a whole bunch of other risks. So, I know it's challenging because the Jersey Shore is very congested, but it seems to me we could find a much less risky route to connect all those turbines to the power grid. And I'm curious to your thoughts there.
Yeah, Glenn, it's a good question. And by the way, I was in Seagirt on Sunday reviewing the troops, the National Guard troops. By the way, I may say parenthetically, we have the second largest deployment since World War II in the Gulf region. And then when you add to that, and Glenn, I appreciate what you said about helping folks out down south. It was the smallest number of troops I've reviewed in 7 years because of the deployments. But yeah, there were a lot of protesters as I was driving in, and I have complete respect for them. Offshore wind, which is going to happen, notwithstanding COVID, supply chain, people's concerns about their view, whales, and now the connecting cables, commercial or recreational fishing. All those are issues that we take very seriously. This is happening and it will happen. It certainly will be a more conducive environment for that industry if Kamala Harris is elected president than if I'm reading former President Trump correctly on how he views offshore wind. But Glenn, I'm going to say both. I have nothing but respect for the concern, but also I have confidence that we're doing this safely. But more importantly, I'd much rather you hear that from an expert, and I'm not an expert on implications, scientific implications, etc. So Natalie Hamilton is with me. I'd love to ask, I think, Christine Sadovi, who's the president of the Board of Public Utilities, in some combination of her and Dennis Eveloff, who's our head of policy. I think that's the right duo to get back to you, Glenn. And as we always do, we promise to get back within 24 hours, and we will do that and stay tuned. Again, this industry is a huge deal for us. It's clean energy, it's union jobs, it's sufficiently offshore. This last round was 40 miles offshore. So there's so much to like about it. And that's not to say that there aren't challenges. I completely respect that. And we're trying to responsibly chop through all of them.
So it's been almost a year since Ørsted pulled out of their two offshore wind projects. And it seemed to be a moment for the entire offshore wind industry that things were just not looking good, and interest rates high, supply chain problems, all kinds of problems. And I know you weren't happy about the situation with Ørsted, but just in the last few days, Atlantic Shores, the other company building off New Jersey, has gotten approval from the federal government to start building. So, like, soon we're going to have power coming off of the shore.
Yep.
That's going to power, what is it, 1 million homes.
You bet.
So are you feeling more optimistic that this is now going to start to pick up steam, to mix a metaphor?
I am, and you've picked up steam. You've framed it very, very nicely. You had COVID, supply chain, aftershocks, high interest rates, and inflation. That combination was not conducive to this industry. It's probably the industry that I think got nicked up the most, at least the one that we have of the industries we have in New Jersey. Interest rates are coming down. We're getting further out from the pandemic. Supply chain challenges are still there, but they're starting to work their way through. There is still, I believe, a legitimate political risk here, and that is, which administration are we going to be dealing with? Now, we had started a lot of this during the last Trump administration. So even with President Trump, we're going to do our best to make sure that this proceeds apace in the manner that we're planning. But I'd be naive to think that it won't be more challenging, given just a lot of the rhetoric and a lot of sort of the context that they have put around this. I have no such qualms in a Harris-Walz administration. So we'll see. But you're absolutely right. This is going in the right direction. Let's get through November 5th and take it to the next level.
Okay, let's go back to the phones. We have Troy from Camden City on the phone. Hello, Troy.
Hey, Troy.
Hello. Hello, Nancy. Hello, Governor. How are you, sir? This is Troy Oglesby, who thank you for your text messages every other month.
I appreciate that, Troy. I assumed it was you. Nice to see. Nice to hear from you.
Yeah. Same, likewise. So, Governor, there's a real hypocrisy happening over the DCA's oversight record. That's definitely because of the MOU that's in place with Camden City. Since the early 2000s, we've had directors and staff members, sir, that are coming down into the city, getting paid positions, some in excess of $200,000. Our police budget has gone from $40 million to $80 million. And, of course, you know about the $1.2 billion that caused a 13-count indictment from while this oversight was going on. And then most recently, the city council voted on an ordinance to pay for legal fees in which our New Jersey Attorney General is charging a former elected official. There has to be some remedy that the state can do to watch over the DCA's oversight, because it's like having the fox over the hen house. Is there something that we can do to look at these inappropriate oversight?
Yeah. So, Troy, thank you. And it's good to hear from you. I'm going to ask probably Emmy Quispe, who's our Deputy Chief of Staff in charge of outreach, and probably Jacqueline Suarez herself, who's the Commissioner of the Department of Community Affairs, to reach out to you. And I have a lot of regard for you personally and for your question, but I'm going to part company with you on a couple of things. First of all, Jacqueline Suarez is a superstar. She is running the Department of Community Affairs, and she stepped into the huge shoes left by Sheila Oliver, another superstar. I have complete and utter faith in her leadership. Secondly, I don't have the law enforcement bill in front of me, but I would just say, you never say money is no object, but boy, Camden is by all measures headed in the right direction. Does it have a lot more road to travel? You betcha. There's no question about that. So in other words, I'm not saying it's worth every penny, quote unquote, because I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know what the public safety record is, and it's trending meaningfully in the right direction. On the last comment, which is the thing I know that's gotten some airtime lately, again, this was a decision that Jacqueline made. This is, by the way, how much are you willing to reimburse for legal fees for current or former elected officials?
And specifically, we're talking about Dana Red, the former
Correct.
mayor of Camden, who
Correct.
now can get her legal fees paid for. And
Correct.
she's part of the Norcross indictment. Go on.
Yes. But I would argue, and I think Jacqueline would argue if she were here, if you look at cities that are in a transitional aid regime, which Camden is in, the reimbursements that they had were not consistent with other communities in the state. And Jacqueline made completely separate and apart from the individual that you just referred to, in the case you just referred to, that the numbers were not comparable to what we have seen in other like communities. And she approved the raising of those reimbursements. And so that's, again, Troy, good question. I'm a big fan of yours, but I part company with you on some of this. In Camden, by the way, I was in Camden yesterday. It's no secret I'm trying to drag the Philadelphia 76ers across the water. I still think it's probably Philadelphia's to lose, but we are in the hunt. And I want to do everything I can in my remaining 15 months to get Camden in as good a posture as possible.
Do we still have Troy there, or is his
Open
mic
door
been cut off?
policy to meet with you. Yeah. No,
Okay,
I'm still here, and I would
Yeah.
I would love to have a meeting with you, Governor, because the issues are very real to the people who are actually living in the city, and we definitely need to have some feel of assurance that we are being heard.
Yeah, I completely understand that, and I will tell you, at least through the lens of the Department of Community Affairs and Jacqueline and her leadership, you are being heard. Nancy.
What I don't understand is, I mean, there's the question of how much the lawyers should be reimbursed for their work on the case, whether, it was the cap was $125 an hour, and now it could go up to anything. But what I don't
is, I think the words are reasonable. Yeah.
Whatever that means.
Yeah, but that's the standard in other cities with transitional aid.
But what I don't understand is, why is a former mayor of a city who's been indicted on criminal charges, why are the legal fees being paid for in any case? And I mean, maybe if she's acquitted, but if she's found guilty, why should the taxpayers pay for her legal defense?
Two things. Number one, you are innocent in this country, last I checked, until proven otherwise. And secondly, that's the standard that's been applied in other cities under transitional aid. They had asked for something else, and I believe, and my colleagues will tell me, I hope Paramount Garg is listening, I think they had asked for advances on their legal fees, which I think Jacqueline rejected. So what she did is she raised the standard to levels in other comparable communities. She's comfortable with that. If she's comfortable with that, I'm comfortable with that.
Troy, thanks for your call. This kind of brings up another question in my mind about the indictment of George Norcross for racketeering and running a criminal enterprise. The Norcross defense team is running a very effective campaign to sway public opinion against the indictment. There have been a slew of editorials and op-eds, particularly in the Star-Ledger, the state's largest newspaper, suggesting that the indictment is weak, yet many of the writers of these op-eds have an actual connection to the defense team. I fully agree and, of course, accept that defendants are innocent until proven guilty. But isn't there a risk of going too far in the other direction and sowing distrust in the institutions that fight public corruption and uphold the law? And I guess the question to you is, are you going to defend your attorney general against? This has been a litany of attacks against Matt Platkin over this indictment.
I have defended him. Somebody asked me right after this happened, do I have faith or full faith in Matt Platkin? I said, absolutely. So I just would say that, period. That's unequivocal. This may surprise you. I don't read the Star-Ledger editorial page, and I haven't read it in years. So I actually am, all kidding aside, I'm not read into this so-called conspiracy theory. I do think
this is not a conspiracy theory.
Well, no, but
or they're saying it is. Is that what you mean?
No, I don't even know what I mean because I haven't read it. Okay. Everybody's innocent until proven guilty, number one. And number two, I think we should have, Donald Trump's gotten away with murder in terms of attacking. I think everybody deserves our belief that they're in it for the right reasons, that the accused are innocent until proven guilty, that the prosecutor, the attorney general, whoever it might be, the jury of their peers, whatever the situation is, that everybody's trying to do the right thing. And that's where I am, and we shall see. But I don't read, if it's the Star Ledger, I'm not kidding, I don't read the editorial page.
Well, this is something you and I agree on, because I do believe that attacking the Attorney General's office over an indictment that, we have to see how it needs to go to court. The evidence needs to be produced and discussed.
I agree.
And, but to immediately jump in and say the Office of Public Integrity and Accountability, the one office in the state that fights public corruption besides the Comptroller's office, that somehow is corrupt and not doing its job, to me, that's a problem.
I think we would be disingenuous if we both didn't say that you have complete faith in our process and our system, and at the same time say that people are innocent until they're proven guilty, and that both sides of this trade need to be dealt with fairly. And that's where I land.
Okay, well, let's talk about high school students, because I know you like this topic. You're supporting a bill that would give 16 and 17-year-olds the right to vote in school board elections. You were in Hoboken recently and told student activists there that you think school elections are the first step in giving them full voting rights. So what's your thinking on this?
First of all, I love it. And there are some courageous teenagers who have been game changers here. First in Newark and the GEM project. They are going to vote in April in school board elections in Newark. And our Secretary of State and Lieutenant Governor Tahisha Way and her team are doing a fantastic job to make sure the infrastructure is in place to allow this, because this is the first time this has ever happened. And then more broadly, Vote 16NJ, another great organization with great young leadership. We're working with them and legislative leaders, Raj Mukherjee and Cleopatra Tucker, respectively, in the Senate and Assembly. This would allow, if the bill makes it to my desk, I will sign it. It will be the first state in the nation, in our nation's history, to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in school board elections. So Newark is doing it. God bless them. I want to do it as a state. And this would not be just giving permission. This would be mandating it. And I do think it's the first step. And I think so much in any election has an overwhelming amount to bear on the generation that is behind us. And yet the restrictions on their ability to vote are significant. And sadly, the enthusiasm among young people is not what it needs to be. Although in New Jersey, we led the nation in 2020 in terms of youth voter turnout, and I would hope we can reprint that in 2024. But I think this would be a game changer, not just in school, certainly first and foremost in school board elections, but ultimately in the bigger democracy sense. We've been trying to open up democracy from day one through a whole bunch of steps. I think this is one of, if not the most profound, assuming we get there.
It would be pretty cool if it resulted in some teenagers on their own school boards, right?
Very cool.
That would be great.
Very cool. And by the way, it's not a lay down hand. Even some folks who are close allies of mine have reached out to me and said, are you sure we can trust these young people with a vote? And I say yes. The answer is yes.
Okay, this is Ask Governor Murphy. I'm Nancy Solomon. We'll be right back after this quick break.
It's WNYC. There's more of Ask Governor Murphy just ahead. Coming your way in 20 minutes at 8 p.m., it is WNYC's election series, America, Are We Ready? Tune in, call in as well for that. That's coming up at 8 on WNYC. Low of about 48 degrees overnight.
On the next All of It. Before the advent of computer-generated imagery, filmmakers created special effects with makeup and artistry. Now a new series on the Criterion Channel puts a seasonal spotlight on horror films that push the boundaries of what was visually possible, from Frankenstein to The Fly. We'll talk to the series curator. I'm Allison Stewart. Join me for All of It, weekdays at noon on WNYC.
WNYC supporters include Carnegie Hall, presenting a spotlight on the music of South Africa. October 25th through 29th, genres include jazz, chamber music, choral music, and more. Tickets and information at carnegiehall.org.
You're listening to Ask Governor Murphy, a co-production of WBGO, WNYC, and WHYY. Got a question for New Jersey's governor? Call us now at 844-745-8255. That's 844-745-TALK. Or pose your question on Twitter or Facebook with the hashtag AskGovMurphy.
I'm Nancy Solomon. We're live with the governor, and we're going to take another call from We're going to take a text message from social media. Kenny Burns, what do you have?
Jeffrey in Princeton, who prefaces his question as a former member of the school board there. Why focus on having students vote in school board elections rather than deal with more difficult but substantive issues?
Well, the answer, Jeffrey, is and both. There's no reason you can't do both. So banning books is a good example of a substantive, of a substantive issue, which we are adamantly opposed to. I know Senator Andrew Zwicker, by the way, and that's his district in Princeton. He lives in South Brunswick, but the district includes Princeton, is a big ally in that fight. I don't see there's any disconsonance, if you will, between both promoting the ability for 16 and 17-year-olds to vote on the one hand, and at the same time, and by the way, I suspect you'll get even a richer, better perspective from those 16s and 17-year-olds on things like book bans, because they have to live, they're living it. We all, speak for myself, you're viewing it as a parent. They're living it. And so I think it's both and both. And we'll continue to be vigilant on both fronts. And I'm using book bans as one substantive issue. There are, unfortunately, this day and age, there are plenty. And we'll continue to focus on them all.
Let's stick with caller questions. We have Eric from Basking Ridge on the line.
Hello, Eric.
Good evening, Governor. I'm calling about the planned extension on the turnpike improvements. While I agree that what's in place is deteriorating badly, I disagree with the plan to widen the extension, simply because that would be funneling more traffic into the Holland Tunnel. And by doing that, basically, you're making a bottleneck worse. Having read the power broker, adding more lanes to a highway does not improve a traffic situation when there's a limited exit from that section of highway.
Yep. So, Eric, I would love, first of all, Natalie, let's get Fran O'Connor, our outstanding commissioner of the Department of Transportation, to give Eric a shout. A couple of things. Number one, this is another and both. Jeffrey asked about 16, 17-year-olds versus other stuff. This is a classic. We're doing a lot of different things. So we're building 2 new rail tunnels at long last under the Hudson. We'll then rehab the old ones. You've probably seen some press that there's renovations and platform extensions underway at New York Penn Station. We're finally, after being stuck in the mud before we got here, we're finally moving the Port Authority bus terminal. We are, in fact, widening the turnpike in the access into the Holland Tunnel. And I would say two things, Eric. And again, Fran is an expert on this, and he's probably more articulate on it than I am. Number one, which I've said a lot, I'm hoping that by the time this is finished, most of our vehicles are electric. So you didn't ask about pollution, in fairness, but that's one concern people have had, and I think that's going to go away over time. And this is a long dated project, so I'm not exaggerating when I say that most of the vehicles would be electric by the time it's fully finished. And secondly, the impression is that the current access width, access generally, is sufficient. And it is not. It is incredibly outdated. And so the experts will tell you, and I'm not one of them, that this is high time we both widened and did some other things that would make not just the bottlenecks away from the tunnel go away, but to your point, Eric, be much smarter about that widened road and how it leads into the tunnels themselves. But I'm going to have the experts follow up with you. Fran, maybe Natalie Diane Scacchetti, who's still a very important member of our team, former chief of staff, former commissioner of the Department of Transportation, walked the site with me in Camden yesterday, by the way. Maybe Fran and Diane can both follow up with Eric.
Eric, thanks for your call. Let's stay with the phones. We have Richard in Parsippany on the line. Hey, Richard.
Hey, Richard.
Good afternoon. Good evening, Governor.
Hey, sir.
I have a question, and it's a pleasure speaking with you. Since the ban of the plastic bags has been such an overwhelming success here in New Jersey, I was wondering what could be done, if anything, about a problem that most people probably don't even realize is a problem. At the present time, prescription pill bottles, which are those orange things with the white caps, are virtually 100% made from either plastic 4 or plastic 5, which we know virtually no township in New Jersey recycles. They can be made, and in some instances are made, of plastic number 1, which is easily recyclable in most towns.
Okay.
Can the state do anything to outlaw the prescription bottles made from 4 and 5 and make them be made from plastic number 1, which would be so much less harmful and easier to be recycled?
I would be lying, Richard, if I said I've ever been asked this before, so I have not, but you lay it out in a pretty compelling way. And the answer is, do we have the ability at the state level for the legislature to pass a law for me to sign that would broadly do things like you're asking me? The answer is yes, we can. But I've never been asked this before. So I'm going to ask Dennis Zeveloff, Natalie, our head of policy, to follow up with you. You make a pretty compelling case, and I wasn't aware of it. I actually, the recycle symbol is on the bottom of every pill bottle I've ever seen. So I assume that, in fact, I put it in a separate bin, and I assume that these suckers were getting recycled.
Because it's too small to read, so you don't know what number it is.
I've got my, the number I can't see for sure. But I see, the triangle, the famous triangle is on the bottom of these things. And I assumed, perhaps naively, that they were going to the same place that, cans and plastic water bottles will go on. But if not, Richard, I promise you we're going to look into it. And if there's a move we can make, consider us open-minded to that. So thank you.
So let's talk about the state police. A few weeks ago, Attorney General Matt Platkin came out with a damning report on the New Jersey State Police that found racism and sexism in its highest ranks. A lot of the report focused on the Internal Affairs Department that used its power to harass people who made complaints. These are, troopers who are basically blowing the whistle. This is the agency that was under federal monitoring, as I'm sure you know, for 10 years for racial profiling of Black and Latino drivers. In one complaint involving a trooper who was accused of having sex with a 14-year-old girl, a lieutenant in the Internal Affairs Department sent a text message to colleagues discussing the arrest of the trooper saying, "Can we at least see a pic of her?" A pic, short for picture. "I'd like to see what all the hubbub is about." And none of the other officers on that text change ever filed any kind of complaint about that text. The NAACP has called on you to replace State Police Superintendent Patrick Callahan. How do you respond to all of this?
Pat Callahan is not going to get replaced on my watch. So let me say that unequivocally. That email is beyond disgusting. Now, that person, I'm told, is no longer in the state police, but it is beyond disgusting. Think about that, everybody. Think about that if that were your daughter or not. It's just, the word disgusting does not do it justice. So let me be unequivocal about that as well. Very concerned. Listen, this report, and these were really kind of two reports. There's an internal affairs report, and then there was a report on promotions and equity, and they're both very concerning. And having said that, I think there are 24 or 25 recommendations I don't have it in front of me. That sounds about right.
Yeah.
I said this in a statement. Listen, we've got the best law enforcement unit in the entire country. I've been governor for 7 years. I was chair of the National Governors Association. I've been around the country. I know enough to be dangerous. We have the best in the business. But having said that, there's no question that there's a lot of wood to chop, that there's some really concerning stuff, not just the IA stuff, which we talked about. And that's one example that's in that report, but more broadly, as it relates to equity. And we owe it to not just most, but we owe it to every brave member of our state police who put their life on the line every day, that they get treated with the respect and dignity and equity that they deserve. And I have complete confidence that between the Attorney General and the Colonel, that they will chop through each and every one of those recommendations, and that we will get to a better place. I think if the Colonel were here, he would say that they had already chopped through some of this and that they had made progress, but he would be the first to admit that there is a long way to go, and that there needs to be a lot more energy, reform, etc. And I'm completely confident that we will see that, and we will stay on it. I promise you.
But you don't want to, I mean, he's the guy at the top. You don't hold him responsible for the failures of the agency?
I would bet you that he is his own worst critic, knowing him who he is. And who bats 1,000? And I don't make light of any of this, but he also is the guy that deserves the credit for the heroism that went on in Georgia and North Carolina last week, that went on during COVID, that went on, during any number of law enforcement emergencies, rescues. So when listen, he's the top of that pyramid. I'm the top of the Jersey pyramid. You're not in those positions unless you're willing to both hit home runs and strike out and take the consequences. And I know Pat is exceedingly tough on himself. He holds himself to an extremely high standard, and as does Matt. I have to say, to both of their credit, they're both good guys. They're in this for the right reason, and I have enormous confidence that they will chop through these recommendations and get us to a better place. And that's not to make light of any of this for 1 second. Deeply concerning, deeply disturbing stuff that came out of that report, that I'm committed as governor and they are committed as AG and colonel respectively to fix.
Let's go back to the phones quickly before we run out of time. We have Tom calling from Barnegat.
Hello, Tom.
Hello, Governor. I'm calling about an issue that's related to clean energy. You talked about the offshore wind power system a little bit earlier. I've been trying to find out the details, especially relating to benefits, tax credits or rebates. If I change my heating system from the usual gas furnace to heat pump technology, which is a new technology that's been adopted very broadly in Europe. And I know people have gone to heat pumps up in Massachusetts and in Maine, but it's a little bit more expensive than a gas furnace. But I've gone online to nj.gov to try to find out how New Jersey sits with that. There's a lot of federal benefits. There should be state benefits as to tax benefits and rebates if you make the change. And sometime in the next year or so, myself and a bunch of neighbors probably need to replace our heat vac system. And we would like to go, because of the clean energy benefits as well as others, to this heat pump system.
Yeah. Tom, I love the question. And the answer is, we were accused of going, you may remember this maybe a year or two ago, that we're going into your house and we're ripping out your gas stove.
Yes, I do remember that.
And we said, we're actually not doing that, but we are incenting you to go to a cleaner energy route, and the heat pump route is in fact that. So we do have incentives, Tom, and and Natalie, I think this is another Dennis Zeveloff special, to ask Dennis to call Tom and just literally walk through what that looks like. I don't know the details in front of me.
Is it all online somewhere where
It
you can
should be.
see all the incentives
It
for
should be.
good energy stuff?
Yeah, I'm a little concerned that Tom went on nj.gov, which is the Right Master First Pass website, and didn't see it. So it should be. Let me put it that way.
Okay.
But
maybe next month we'll come back with an actual information about
after
what's
the
available.
election.
Yes. Kenny, what do you have on social media?
I have another name for Mr. Evanoff, Annette in Seaside Park. She has several questions about offshore wind.
Okay.
Why the rush to install these foreign company offshore wind turbines? By the way, I'm quoting. Who is responsible for repairing damage to these 1,000 plus foot turbines? How will they uphold in a New Jersey nor'easter or hurricane? Have they ever been tested? Why the rush? Why wasn't this put on the ballot for NJ taxpayers to vote on this costly project? Closed quote.
Okay. Annette, I hate to ruin, Dennis is already busy tomorrow, but he's going to get another call here. So, Annette, I'm going to have, if you're listening, Dennis Zeveloff, our head of policy, excuse me, to follow up with you. The short answer is offshore wind proliferates in lots of other places in the world, especially in Northern Europe. And the answer on that is it's been tried and true tested. The industry's been around a long time, even though we haven't had it in New Jersey. We have the largest program in the country. Annette, it is safe, it's clean, it's union jobs, and ultimately it's economically attractive. The cost curve on offshore wind has been going in the right direction. And again, we came through the bumps of supply chain, inflation, et cetera. We're getting through that. At the end of the day, this is an ultimate win-win-win. And I take your concern seriously. We'll follow up with you. But this is ultimately going to be a very, very good thing for New Jersey.
And a good thing for the world, don't you think?
Yeah, not just us. We talked about with the storms, we can only do so much as a state. And even I would admit, for all that we're doing, we're getting dragged by Mother Nature. But we need federal solutions. You need global, these COP meetings don't have as much teeth as they need to have. You need China, India, Europe in the boat with you. But having said that, that's not, you could read the other side of that, Nance. It's not the permission slip to do nothing. You have to do your share, even though you can at the same time say, we need the bigger authorities, the bigger entities to come along with us.
I think it's ironic. I try not to use that word too much, but I do think it's ironic that the opposition to wind power is coming from the shore, the communities at the shore, where those are the first communities that are going to be affected by climate change in New Jersey, already have been.
And sea level rise.
Sea level rise, exactly.
Jersey Shore in South Florida, in a seminal study a few years ago.
It's WNYC. We apologize for cutting in there. Coming up in just a moment on WNYC, it's WNYC's election series, America, Are We Ready? That's in just a moment at 8 p.m. Tonight, it's going to be pretty chilly here in our region. We'll have temperatures in the upper 40s. It's WNYC on a Wednesday evening at 8 p.m.
This is WNYC, FM, HD, and AM, New York.
From WNYC in New York and Marketplace from American Public Media, this is America.